81. Madagascar from a spiritual point of view. May 8th, 1847. Original content summary. The actual inhabitants of Madagascar are from Asia and from there populated South Africa. They are the actual Cainites, therefore their intellectual formation is still low. They alone put the female gender above the male. Feminine manner, their philosophy, a peculiar religion, and the reason for it. The greatest chastity on earth. Whites are only half men. An El Dorado Lucifer. Difficult accessibility of the coasts of the country, and likewise entrance of these people in the hereafter. Fate of these souls after death, reincarnation. After the island of Ceylon, the larger island of Madagascar belongs to Africa. This island is inhabited by a very peculiar people who settled here from Asia during the prehistoric times. But it is not to be thought that this people inhabited this island from Africa, but it was in fact the reverse. Southern Africa was mostly populated from this island. The inhabitants are mostly Moors, while the inhabitants of the former island are either brown, sometimes dark brown in colour. The inhabitants of Madagascar have a perfectly black skin colour. Among them only very few are dark copper brown. These people, with a few exceptions, are still the very actual Cainites, in whom the formation of the spirit is still at the lowest level. They have a concept of a supreme being, but this is as dark as her skin colour. This people is the only one that sets the female gender above the male. Therefore a queen, and never a king, of a perfectly divine appearance, sits upon the throne, and governs her people completely at whim and despotically. But the reason for the fact that the feminine gender prevails here is that their wise ones, who are all women, teach the people to think that the woman is more perfect than the man. The man is seen in his muscular pits, that he is not yet filled, while the woman is already finished with what is only beginning with men. Thus, the man has no breasts, therefore he cannot have such deep and wise feelings as the women. The man is also much more hairy than the woman, thus closer to the animal gender than the woman. The man also has an animal elongated extension between the legs like the monkey, which no longer occurs in women. Then the woman is much more noble and beautiful than the man, and the human race comes only from her. She would demand intercourse, but yet how little value creation has placed on the work of the man, and how much woman stands higher than the man, could be seen most clearly from this generational work. The work of the man only lasted for so many moments, as he has fingers on his hands. But for the woman, it would cost so many months. The duration of time clearly determines the hardly calculable advantage of the female gender above the male. From such philosophies, these feminine modes of their gender show incalculable virtue, and even prove that the Supreme Being, if it be somewhere, is itself a most perfect woman. They also have temples in which they worship and revere above all the woman as the Godhead. And the chief objects of worship in women are the genitals, and then the breast. When they perform their main service, which happens every full moon, the most sublime moment in this service is when a naked living woman stands on the altar, puts her hands on the genitals, and soon begins to urinate. At the moment of urinating, all the male gender falls down on the face and is then urinated on by the female. A similar divine worship is also to be found in some tribes of Africa, who, of course, have brought the same from their motherland. The female genital, which is easily understandable, is so highly revered because from it the human generation derives its origin. It is remarkable that there is no more chaste and prudent people living on the earth's surface than this one here, with regard to the satisfaction of carnal desire. Except for the temple, no procreation is allowed, having immediate death penalty. And this may only be carried out at a given time, only once a year, after a number of acts of worship have been carried out according to their concepts. And when the generation takes place, it must be completely dark in the temple. The woman, however, has the right to be satisfied by her slaves more often if she desires it. But if a man were to demand a woman, that will already be a high crime. The white people are regarded as only half humans, who can be hunted if one wants to have some good meat. If a captured white man pleases her well and a Madagascar woman finds a special delight in him, she can give him life and keep him as a ridiculous monkey for their entertainment, where he would, do understand, often do things which would, as you would say, is too bad for the devil. The men, when they are caught, fare still somewhat better, but the women are slaughtered and roasted without mercy and pardon, because the women of the whites are held by these black women for mere animals. How far these people are still from the spiritual formation, as still very inaccessible to the gospel, can be seen from this little. There have indeed already been attempts, now and then on the coast, but up until now, everything had been in vain, for, it may be said, Lucifer still led his regiment quite unperturbed. The land itself, however, is also placed in such a way as to offer the greatest defiance to the entrance of every great power, because this island is only accessible on very few points. The sea is round about in great extent full of cliffs and shallows. With larger vessels it is almost impossible to access, but in a few places only in barges when the sea is calm. And visitors of this land must be very careful not to get into the hands of the Madagascarians, who are lurking everywhere. The queen of this country, also continually supervises its coasts, and the whole coast is continually covered with impenetrable scrub, which is also populated by a multitude of evil vermin, like all sorts of poisonous worms and insects, against which only the natives protect themselves by means of painting themselves with a certain plant. At certain times, especially in the spring, in the summer and half of autumn, altogether half a year, this island is not accessible, for it is swarming with trillions of great flying ants, called muscats by some naturalists, which are much more annoying than the mosquitoes of the American islands. When at that time a European would be at the coast, and is attacked by a swarm of these muscats, he will be a dead corpse within a few minutes. The natives, however, are not attacked by them, because the smell of the herb with which the natives smear themselves is highly intolerable to them. From this brief description, you will easily see what it is with this more than pagan people in the spiritual world. It is very difficult to deal with them. Indeed, they could more easily be washed white than to awaken their spirits for the gospel. Souls of such people either become the so-called nature spirits, or they are taken to another planet, where they are again given a lighter material covering, and thus still a material life, in which they become more and more receptive to the gospel. Only very few will, after the death of their body, come to the right realization with great difficulty. These nature spirits, however, are put into the flesh by procreation in the course of time, either once again in a better part of the earth, or they are also led to another planet. Now you know enough of this very shrunken people of the earth. We therefore do not want to stay with them any longer, but instead go over to their neighbours,